Well, we were involved, we've built about 200 kilometres of motorway in the last 10, 12 years in Ireland, and we joined up with PBG Group and Hydro-Budowy and Aprilia to tender for a number of projects in Poland, and we won a section of the A4 down near Rzeszów. When the project, when we bid it, every second turn we took as to who was the leader, and on this particular one we happened to be leader. And then in the course of the project, the PBG and their associates went bankrupt. And we decided at that stage we had a situation where the engineer on the project had recommended nearly 429 days, I think was the figure, of extensions of time, and none of them was incorporated in the contract, which was an absolutely bizarre situation, that you could have that amount of time recommended by the engineer but none incorporated into the contract. So we were in the face of the situation where the contract was going to terminate and no extensions of time had actually been granted. So we terminated the contract first because we saw no other alternative. It's the last thing a contractor wants to do, is to terminate a contract. The contractor wants to do the project, get on, have it on their CV for future projects and get on with it. And a situation where we had to terminate it because the project wasn't being dealt with or managed properly is an extraordinary situation. I think there's huge problems in the way these projects have been prepared and the way they have been managed. I think contractors from all over Europe tendering in Poland, they're looking, this is FIDIC Red Book, which is client design, so they get a shovel-ready project, so that they expect the design to be finished, they expect all the permits to be in place, and they expect if the problems that they encounter because these issues aren't in place, that they will be dealt with speedily and efficiently. And the reality is different. So when an issue is encountered on a project, so a permit isn't in place, they find that there is no response from the client in a timely manner that gets that issue dealt with. And these projects, fundamentally, if you're FIDIC Red Book, these projects are funded effectively by the client. But there seems to be an expectation in Poland that the contractor has vast amounts of money, which is impossible in the current liquidity squeeze with all the banks shrinking their balance sheets, and that the contractor then will deal with all these problems, fund the working capital while these problems are being resolved. There's no effective mechanism to resolve the problem, and the contractor just runs up more and more working capital, which isn't available any longer. Maybe contractors who have been working in Poland for quite some time aren't surprised, but certainly for us, which this was the first project we got involved in Poland, it was a big surprise to find we had FIDIC Red Book and an engineer who was, as we saw it, appointed under FIDIC to manage the contract, has no effective power. So the engineer is recommending extensions of time and the client isn't engaging. So no extensions of time are forthcoming. And when you have disasters on the project where you find, in our case, we found animal bones dumped in chemicals to decompose them, which meant it's an environmental disaster, and under all sorts of EU rules it has to be cleaned up, and therefore the client has to take the project back, or that part of the project back, and then it takes 14 months to sort it out, and the site then is handed back and no extension of time available. To our mind, you cannot operate projects where that type of situation happens. There's a presumption that this is a shovel-ready site, and if it isn't a shovel-ready site, then the contractor is entitled to have the issues that are not ready dealt with, and the contractor is entitled to be compensated for those issues that aren't, because the contractor has bid this project on the basis that this is a shovel-ready site. And if that is not the case, either the contractor gets compensated, or from a procurement point of view, the contractor has been misled. And that's a huge issue from a European perspective if contractors are being invited to tender for projects and then they're expected to do something else, because that invites all sorts of irregularities in order to get over those issues, which is not the example I gave, for example, where you have the contractor encounters bones dumped in chemical waste. Now maybe an experienced contractor might actually decide, well, I say nothing here. And that is not what the European funds are designed to help a situation where issues like that are ignored. The expectation is the contractor will bring those to the attention and the issue will get dealt with properly in compliance with European laws and so on. But if contractors know that that's not going to happen, then maybe they will conceal those issues. And that certainly is not part of the plan. In a civil engineering project by its nature cannot be designed absolutely perfectly. A motorway project, 30, 35, 40 kilometres, it's a big site. It's impossible to predict in advance everything exactly that's going to happen. So therefore you need the mechanisms in place in order to deal with those problems as they arise. And the FIDIC Red Book contract is around for nearly 100 years. And the designers of that contract who developed it over all that period of time, they know there's no such thing as a perfect site. So they have put the mechanisms in place in order to deal with those issues as they arise. Now, what appears to be the position in Poland is that the engineer may well realise what's wrong and may have a solution, but the client isn't reactive enough in order to come to terms with that solution and pay the contractor for what his entitlement is and give him his extension of time in order to do it. These projects are only fixed price lump sum under the FIDIC Red Book if the site is perfect from the start and the design is perfect. But we all know that that never happens. Well, I think what's happened is a huge disaster for Poland. It's a disaster on a number of levels. The road projects that are being built are costing far more than they need to. That's because there's absolutely no innovation allowed by the contractors. In our case, we could actually build the same project for half the price in Ireland, even though labour costs in Ireland are significantly higher in Poland. And it's not because Irish people are any smarter or anything than Polish people, it's because the basic designs here are over-designed. They're not cleverly designed in terms of there's a lot of better ways to build these things. So, for example, prefabricated components are hardly used at all. There's too much concrete built in situ. Culverts, for example, they're cast in situ here with people spending months spending reinforcing steel, subject to all weather conditions and so on. In Ireland, it would arrive in the back of a lorry and be put in a few days. These seems to be absolutely no transfer of knowledge from countries where these motorways are actually built a lot cheaper to Poland. And if you think of the amount of money that was invested under the cohesion funds in road construction, you could have got more motorway for your money with a lot less grief. And that's a terrible disaster for Poland because the cohesion funds in one way have been misspent. It would be a great opportunity for the Polish roads construction industry to be the most efficient in Europe, have the capability to build motorways cheaper than anywhere else in Europe, and that opportunity has been totally missed because there's no transfer of knowledge. So unfortunately, I think now the position is that there is no way to change the current system from within. There has to be a lot of force from externally put on. And so we've made a complaint to the European Commission. We said, what's going on here is unacceptable. It's a fundamental breakdown of the European internal market because it's just not working. In a situation where there's billions of zlotys owed to contractors building, all the contractors can't be wrong. Of course, there are some cases where some contractors have bad prices, but other contractors have good prices and prices that they would make an awful lot of money on at that price in other countries. But basically, the way the projects are implemented here means it's very hard to make that sort of money. And so I think the only way that this is going to be resolved at the moment is through pressure from the European Commission, and that's why we've gone to the European Commission. Well, I think the first thing, there has to be a way out of the current situation. And the current situation whereby the only resolution of everything is in a Polish court that is totally overcrowded, has no capability to resolve these issues, and may well be run by judges who have no understanding of the construction process. That's a never-ending process. That will just take years and years and years, and that's just not an acceptable solution. So either far more resources have to be put into that court system, or an alternative dispute resolution system put in place is the only way to resolve it. I think for the future what has to happen is that the engineers who design the projects and who run the project have to be given much more flexibility to actually go and make this work. I mean, the whole nature of an engineer and engineer's training is to make things work. And what seems to be happening in Poland is they seem to be totally constrained in the way they could design the projects, so their creativity, their engineering creativity is blocked, and also when projects run into difficulties, because there are always going to be difficulties on projects of the sort of scale of what's being built in Poland at the moment, that a simple practical solution can be put in place quickly and a deal done with the contractor to get that done. And if it costs more money, it has to be spent. The money has to be spent. But at least you don't end up with a half-finished road.